This is Alice. I'm going to start off with Sweet Land of Liberty, and we're going to do the Sweet Land of Liberty square on page 11 of your instructions. So I'm going to talk to you about how I cut my fabric. So you have white fabric with like a teal bluish color dot, and it should be roughly like 9.5 by 11. All right, so we need an 8.5 by 8.5 inch square. So I cut this off. This is like 9.5 by 8.5, but that's okay. It's a little bit bigger. I wasn't going to worry about cutting both sides down. I just wanted, the basic. This is where we're going to stitch the Sweet Land of Liberty on here. The other piece that you need cut out, and as you can see, I need a 2-inch piece by 3.5, which is going to be a pieced block. All right, so in our pillow, we have these little blocks right here. These are the pieced blocks. And let me see if there's a picture of the pillow from the front side. All right, so this whole piece right here, that's where the pieced blocks go. All right, so we won't need them for a while, but I wanted to cut it out of the fabric so that I have it ready. All right, so to start this block off, again, we want an 8.5 by 8.5 piece for their background. We want to save this for our pieced blocks. So I will put that in an envelope and mark it pieced blocks. The rest of this fabric can be set aside. All right, for now. And you want to have some gold leather for your star, and you want to have some red leather for your firecracker. And both of those are 2 by 2 inch squares is what they recommend. I'm sure it's going to be less than that when I get there. So you're going to see me sewing, doing my embroidery, and that's when I will get my leather out and ready. I hate to waste that embellishment, so I like to cut mine a little bit closer than the 2 by 2. All right, so when I get there, we'll review that. But I wanted you to know, out of this fabric in your kit, this is the main fabric for the background. I'm going to recommend, I am going to do a quilting background. I'm just going to pick one that I have. So I am going to do the stitching for laying down my batting. Oh, sorry about that. So I'm going to lay some batting down. It's going to tack it down. And when it tacks it down, I'm going to trim it so it doesn't end up in the seam. Okay. I'm also going to fuse some Shape Flex 101, the woven interfacing to this fabric. It's very light in color, so I feel more comfortable if I add that Shape Flex to the fabric. I think it'll turn out a lot nicer doing that. So I'm going to add that to my fabric. I'm going to have my batting ready. I'm going to use the light mesh cutaway stabilizer. I prefer to use the Floriani one. It's up to you, but I use Floriani. This is basically what it looks like. All right, so that's what I'm going to be putting in my hoop as well when I get started. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to go get my fabric ready and treat it. I'm going to get a little bag to put my pieced little border in, and then we're going to start block 1. All right, and I'm on page 11 of the instructions. I'm getting ready just to start the Sweet Land of Liberty block. Okay, so now I'm back. I have my piece blocked in my plastic container, or plastic bag here, and I did add Shape Flex, and you can see I didn't cut the Shape Flex exactly to the size. I always like to cut it a little bit smaller so I don't stick it to my iron or to my ironing board. And here's the Shape Flex on the back of the background. So again, your background's roughly 8.5 by 8.5. Mine's a little bigger because I didn't trim it all the way down. So I also needed the leather. You can see that there. I have the gold and the cherry leather. And again, I did not cut that to size as well. So we should add the shape flex to the back of all the backgrounds to help with any puckering. Also the white fabric, so you don't see through, like any light color fabric, you don't want to see through to the back. So you want to add shape flex. So we're on page 11. We're getting ready to do the Sweet Land block. And you can see what colors we need. So we're going to need like a gold to match the gold leather. You're going to see some blue, some red, and that's the color. So that's the main colors that you'll use. And white normally just, I am going to quilt it in white, so we will need white. All right, so if, my other page there. So I think it's page 4. I need to find page 4. All right, so you can see the Sweet Land of Liberty is 5 by 7 on page 11. That is the embroidery file name is 5 by 7 Sweet Land. So you know what hoop you can use. The embroidery field is 4.64 by 5.6 inches. Now I'm going to quilt these. So I need to determine what the quilting file I need from my clear blue tiles. And I'm going to do it block by block because again, we're building this by block. And that will alleviate the batting in the seams when we're all done if I do it by block by block. So in order to determine what size of quilting I need, we're going to refer back to page 4. All right, so page 4 talks about the quilting. And you can see on number 1 is the Sweet Land of Liberty block. And if you look down, it says Sweet Land of Liberty is the wavy design is what they suggested. And they want you to use a 6 by 6 vertical. So they're saying 6 by 6. So that is the finished size of the quilting, 6 by 6. It actually will be bigger than that when you open it up in your hoop. So you're going to need a hoop bigger than 6 by 6 to do this. I'm using like a 9 by 11 hoop, which is my hoop that I normally use. Because I don't have like a 6-inch hoop. I have like a 5 by 7. So in order for me to go to a 6.5 or bigger hoop, I have to do the 9 by 11. So page 4 discusses each one of the blocks and the quilting required. So I am going to open up my clear blue tiles. I'm going to open up the swirls is the one that I'm going to use. Or the scroll. There's a scroll. I'm going to use the scroll on everything. All right. So I know based on page 4, I need to open up the scroll design that is the size 6 by 6. All right. So when I open up that size, that's what I'll be loading up in my machine and then loading the Sweet Land of Liberty on top of it. And then when we're all done with the design, as you can see, we will be cutting the design to 6.5 by 6.5 when we're done. But I won't do that till the end. You'll see all of my cutting instructions in one video. So I'm trying to show you that, even though it finishes, we cut it at 6 by 6, it actually will be a 6 by 6 block when it's all done and sewn in. So our embroidery file or our quilting file should, be the 6 by 6 block as well. But the page 4 is the nicest thing that, talks about the quilting file itself. All right, so we're going to get ready to start to stitch out the Sweet Land of Liberty. So you can see what it looks like. You can see my little swirls in the background. All right, and that's what's going to get stitched first, and you can see it does this block around. So it's going to show me this inner block is going to be my batting placement line and everything, and the outer block is going to be my fabric placement line. So it's going to, let me go ahead and lay my batting down, give me a placement line for my batting, trim my batting, then lay my fabric down. I don't trim the fabric. I'm going to go ahead and continue stitching the entire embroidery file, and then when we're done, we trim the fabric. And that way, if there's any pull or give or anything like that in the fabric, it's not trimmed to the exact size until we're done. And that's another reason why we put the Shape Flex on it, to help with any puckering or anything like that. So this is what my file looks like. Now my machine will allow me to switch it, so I only see what it's going to stitch first, and I can see it's only going to stitch the batting tack down line first. Placement line, I should say, and then the tack down goes right over top of it. And that's the one nice thing about this particular machine. Others do the same thing, so this depends on your own embroidery model. So I just wanted to show you what my file looks like in the screen, and we're going to get ready and stitch it. So I'm going to get my hoop ready. All right, I have my stabilizer loaded. I'm getting ready to start. When I hit start, because I have the quilting design on here, it would help if I had some threaded my needle, and I didn't. So let's talk about the needle, right? If you have not changed your needle in a while, you probably would want to do that starting a new project. All right, based on how many hours your needle has been used. The needles that I use usually will stitch, they say suggested, 7 to 8 hours of stitching. All right, so you might want to do that. I'm putting it back because I didn't have the needle threaded. So I'm going to hit start. So when I hit start on this file, remember I loaded the quilting, so it's going to show me first where to place my batting. Okay, so it's going to give me that square to put the batting down. Now when you do the block by block quilting, it does allow the batting to be placed, and it does not show up in the seam allowance, which makes it really nice when you go to stitch it together. So you definitely want to have some batting available. You could pre-cut your batting if you would like. If I'm doing the 6 by 6, I would say your batting might want to be cut at about 7 by 7, and then you would trim it down. As you can see, I just have a piece of batting. I'm just going to lay it up here. I know this is going to cover it. And then I'm going to trim it once it's done. So I'm going to hit start now. I put the batting down, and it's going to going to tack down my batting. And then once this is done, I'm going to trim this batting close to the line, to this tack down line. And it's going to go around the batting. It should go around the batting twice. It likes to really tack that down, just like it does when we do embroidery with the applique. It usually goes around the appliques twice to hold them down. So once this is done, I'm going to trim, and then we'll be back. All right, so you can see my batting. I have it trimmed pretty close to the line. So the next step I'm going to do, and this is not in the instruction piece, right? This is part of your quilting, is I'm going to stitch where it wants me to place the fabric. All right, so this stitch is probably going to be about 1/4 inch away all the way around. All right, so I needed to tell me where to place my fabric. And while that's doing that, I'm going to take my fabric, and I just like to kind of find that center in a sense. But what you really want to do is you want to have your fabric going beyond the lines all the way around. So first I like to set it on the 2 sides because I can see that, and I know that I have extra batting on the right and left. And then what I like to do is fold one side up and just pull it straight down till I have extra fabric on the top and the bottom, because I already did the 2 sides, and me pulling it straight down is not changing that. All right, so I have all of this covered. All right, I'm happy with where it's at. Okay, I am now going to stitch the next stitch of the quilting file, which is just going to tack down this particular fabric. All right, so it's going to do another square and tack down that fabric for us. All right, the first thing it's going to stitch when we look at our embroidery file is going to be, oh, sorry. Before I get to the embroidery, this is the last piece of the quilting. I almost forgot about this. I'm now going to quilt my swirls. And if you want to see again, this is what the swirl design, oh, that's not too good, but that's what the swirl sign looks like. So it just has little swirls. So I'm going to hit start and I am going to stitch my quilting design now. And I'm doing it in white. I want it to blend, right? I'm just going to have it all in white there. Now, if you're following along with the physical design from Kimberbell, you would be doing a wave design. So I'm going to let this quilt and then we'll be back. Okay, so it has done my quilting design. I'm not sure if you can kind of see it a little bit in here. All right, so that's what I did to my piece going down. If you're not doing that, then you're not going to quilt it at all until maybe you're done. Then you're just loading your design up and you're going to make sure that you get your fabric placed in the center where the design is going to be stitching. And you'll actually stitch down your design. Now, if you do have a basting stitch you can apply around the design, that would be something nice to do to hold the fabric in place, and then you know your fabric's in the right place for doing the embroidery file. But again, I like this piece of having the batting under there but not in my seams, and that's why I chose to do the quilting design. And again, I'm using my design right from my clear blue tiles. You don't always have to go out and buy the specific quilting design for the project. So I'm using my clear blue tiles. If you are watching this video and you're interested in clear blue tiles, please call the shop and let Bunny know that you watched my video building the pillow and you're interested, and check out the price of those. Don't just do it online. It's possible you'll get a special price. So I just want to hint that in there. So if you do call, see what happens. Now, the most that can happen is nothing, but I think she might be willing to give you a special deal on that if you're saying you're interested in this. So there's like 4 seasonal type files on clear blue tiles. I'm just doing the swirls. All right, but there's one that has bees and one that has flowers, I think snowflakes, and I forget what the fall one is. All right, but again, I think the swirls are just fine. It's just a little doodle in the background of doing the item. So now I'm getting into the embroidery file, like I was saying. So you would put your fabric down, your batting down if you wanted it underneath, and you would actually start doing your embroidery file. But if you don't quilt it first, remember you're going to have your batting in your seams and stuff like that, because you're not going to know exactly where to cut that away from. So number 1 is to load the embroidery file. So I'm already past that, right? We loaded the embroidery file. I did forget a thread color. There is a gray color, like a dark gray. Possibly could use black, but you know, they actually call it a gray. We are going to stitch the fuse detail of the firecracker in the gray. And then there is a little swirly design that goes to the star, and they're stitching that in gray. So I'm going to stitch both of those right now. I did load my gray in my machine so I can start it right away. So here we are. We're going to do the little fuse because my firework is going to be up there in that little corner over there. And we're going to next do the little swirl for the star. And again, the machine stops because it's allowing you, if you wanted to pick a different color, right? So if you wanted a different color for that little fuse, you could do that. So that is something nice. It does like a, look at that, really nice double stitch. And because I did it in this darker color, it shows up right on that white fabric that we have for our particular block. I'm just trimming that little bit away there. And now what it's going to do is it's asking us for doing the placement line for our little star. So we want to stitch the placement line first. And I'm going to do all of these stitches now in that gold color. So I am getting ready to change my thread. So I apologize when my hand gets in the camera, but it's just what happens right now. All right. And a lot of you have an automatic needle threader. That's good. Of course, I always break mine, so I usually thread mine still on my own right now. So I'm going to stitch out number 3 of the embroidery file, which is the placement line for where I'm going to put my star. Now, your star is your gold leather. And again, you know, I talked about they suggest you to have a 2" by 2" piece of leather, and I would bet we could do this with an 1.5" by 1.5". So that's probably what we're going to have in our kits. And it might even be less than that, but I'm pretty sure an 1.5" is going to work. Alright, so I'm going to trim that thread. Now what I did, my machine, I can hit a button and it can pull the hoop towards me. So I can work on the hoop and it not be right underneath the actual needle and everything like that. So I do not know if you can see the star. So the star is coming right out of the little loopies here. And there it is. And basically, my star can be a piece that's like 1" by 1". All right. So I'm going to lay that on there and cover up my star. And just in case, I'm going to tape it. And I didn't get a big enough piece of tape, but that's okay. Just get another one. I'm going to tape it on the side, kind of outside where the star is going to be stitching, to hold that in place, okay? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do number 4 of the embroidery file, and I'm going to tack down my leather and tack down this star. And we're going to see how it looks. Let's see if I can, it's not too bad. So just holding the one piece of my leather on the side. Goes around it twice. Again, it's tacking down that leather for us. And the next step is number 7 at the bottom of page 11, and you're going to actually trim the leather close. So I'm going to actually first remove my tape, right? I have some tape here. And then I'm going to actually pull my hoop back out a little bit here. And I'm going to actually pop my hoop off a little bit and move it back up underneath where the camera can see. I don't know if that's going to, it didn't look like it works or helps at all. So I have a little string here I'm going to remove first. And now I'm going to tell you to pick whatever applique scissors you like the best. I like the curves because of my hoop and the way that I do this. And I am right now just going to trim my leather close to the stitch line, but I don't want to cut the stitches, right? So just be careful as you do this not to cut your stitches. So if you need to move your hoop over to a flat table, I'm going to tell you to do that. I have a table around my machine. So that's what I'm using to do this cutting of the star. And I did dislodge my hoop so I could slide it just a little bit easier, because the star, you know, kind of goes around. So I need to, you know, maneuver around the star to get my scissors to go in the right direction. Now when I'm cutting leather, I like to cut a little bit away from the stitch line. You know, like a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch. That's what I prefer to do. I mean, some people cut it really close. I like to leave just a little bit of room. All right. So there's our star. All right. So not too bad. So I am going to now hook my hoop back up, lock it in place. And the next step, I'm going to turn the page, because we're on page 12 now. The next step is to stitch the large star decorative outline. So it's going to do a decorative outline around the leather of this star. Okay, so we're going to start and we're going to let that stitch out. All right, our next step when that is done is to stitch a small star placement line, number 9, at the top of page 12. We are doing number 6 of the embroidery file. So I'm going to hit start, and it's going to show me where to put the little star. Now, I forgot about this fabric for the little star. You're going to get your mustard color. And it says to cut a 1.5 by 1.5 inch square. Okay? And that's probably not a bad size to cut. All right. So on your 9 by 11 piece of fabric, you can go ahead and cut a little corner out, and that's what this star is going to cover. Okay, that's what we're going to cover the star with. So it's like 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. So I forgot that fabric. I apologize for that. But I'm not one to cut all my fabric at the beginning of the project. I like to do it as I go. Okay, so another reason why I don't cut everything out ahead of time is, like, for these pieces, it says 1.5 by 1.5. So I know that's going to be well big enough to cover the star, but I went through my stash, because I keep my scraps from other projects, and I had some of the same mustard, and this is big enough to cover my star. So instead of cutting that out of that big sheet of fabric, I am just going to lay this down, and I'm going to stitch my star and then trim around it. So if you don't have a stash like I do, then you'll cut your 1.5 by 1.5 inch star out of a piece of fabric out of that mustard fabric that we supplied to be the other star. So I'm going to hit start. So it's going to actually stitch down the star. And when that's done, the next step, of course, is to trim around the fabric. So again, we're going to trim around this fabric. All right, I just finished trimming around my star, and now I'm going to hit start, and we are doing the next step of the embroidery file, which is going to do a decorative stitch around that star. So that is number 8 of the embroidery file, and we're on step 13. Okay. So it's doing that decorative stitch. Again, this one is just fabric in the background. Moving on to step 14. 14 tells me to stitch the spark detail. So again, I'm going to use my gold thread, and it's going to stitch a little spark, like, again, star kind of object at the end of the little, the black or the grayish tail that we put on earlier for the spark itself, the actual fireworks spark. And the next thing is to stitch tiny star fill. So it's going to add one more star in here right now. Actually, it's going to add 2 stars. It's going to add one here in the middle, and it's going to put another little star at the end of this little swirl tail where we put our leather star. So it's just adding a little bit more stars here. And these are all done with the gold thread or embroidery. There is no fabric laying down first or anything like that. So as I look ahead, step 16, we're going to stitch the firecracker placement line. And our firecracker is going to be red leather. So I'm going to get my red leather out, and I'm going to actually load my machine with the red thread. Alright, so I have my red loaded. I'm going to hit start, and I'm going to stitch out the placement line for my, excuse me, my leather. And again, it calls for a 2" by 2" piece, but it's not going to be as big as that. So if you have some scrap leather, you're probably going to get a piece that's 1.5 by 1.5 to do this. And I like to go beyond the line just a little bit. And if I, wanted to be careful, I could do it from this side. I'm going to lay my leather down, and I'm going to hit start, and I'm going to do the tack down line of the leather. And if you wanted to tape it in place, you could tape it in place. It's going around it twice. And again, when it's done with that, we need to trim the leather. All right. I don't know if you can see that. Trying to figure out how you can see the stitching line. I guess you can see a little bit of it there. So it stitched the small rectangle. That is way smaller than a 2" by 2" piece, just so you know. So I'm going to trim that little thread out. And then, like I said before, I like to trim my leather a little bit away from the line, not right on the stitch line. And all I'm doing is just trying to make it as straight as I can when I cut it. Now, the leather does have a white backing to it. It is not red all the way through. All right, so when you're done with this square and you get it out of the hoop, it's pliable more. And you can kind of fold your fabric down right along that stitch line underneath. And this white that you see of the leather, you could take a permanent marker to it and make it red and let it blend in. I do not do that until I'm all done because I want to move my fabric out of the way. Don't touch your fabric with the marker, right? You only want to touch the little edge of the leather, and you can actually color that red. So the whole thing looks red all the way around. So just want you to know that that's something I do at the end. All right, now that I have my firework in place, I'm down here on step 20, and it's going to stitch the firework satin outline. Okay, so there's a satin outline going around the firework. So I don't have to worry about the edges, right? I just need to make sure that I have it trimmed because it's going to cover up all those edges. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go back in here and I'm just going to trim off my corners a little bit because I don't want any of my corners sticking, like poking out of the satin stitching. So I think that'll be good enough. All right, so we're gonna put our hoop back on. We're gonna hit start and we're gonna do the satin stitch all around our firework. And we will return. So there's my firework with the red satin stitch all the way around it. Looks really nice. The next stitch is number 14 of the embroidery file, and we're going to stitch the word sweet. All right, so sweet is going to be stitching right up this side. And again, it's in red, so I'm not changing my color. I'm going to hit start, and it's going to start stitching that word sweet. And when that is done, we will return for the next item. Again, I'm just trimming. If I saw a little thread there, I like to trim it out so it doesn't get caught underneath any of the lettering. I'm going to move my hoop back in place. I'm going to hit start. I'm going to do the word sweet. Okay, you can see I have sweet stitched out. There are some jump stitches here. I don't know if your machine will also do jump stitches or not. But I do trim jump stitches when they're like this, especially when they're as long as this. And when it's smaller words, I trim the jump stitches between the words. Maybe not between the letters of a complete word, but at least between the words. So that is done. The next step is to stitch the word land. So this is number 22. We're doing 15 of the embroidery file. I threaded my light blue in. So all I'm going to do is hook my hoop back in because I pulled it out just so you could see the word sweet and how it's stitched out. And I will start the word land. And what happens is the next thing that pops up is the word of. And that's number 16 of the embroidery file. So I'm going to do 15 and 16 in my lighter blue. And then we'll return and we'll take a look at the lettering. Okay, I just finished with the word land. And now I'm getting ready to do the word of. Number 16 of the embroidery file. So I'm going to hit start. And it's going to do of. And then once that's done, we'll have the word liberty to stitch out next. And then that should be the end of this particular block, and we'll have block 1 complete. Okay, I just finished the word of, and I have some jump stitches in here between all the letters that I need to cut out in a little bit here when we take it out of the hoop. But I'm starting the embroidery machine. We're doing number 17 of the embroidery file, and that's the word liberty. And this time we're doing it more in a darker blue. Okay, so the land of was in a lighter blue, and I'm just following along, and the liberty is going to be done in a darker blue. And I have that stitch there that I started with, that it didn't get pulled completely under. So I am just going to trim that off so I don't have any little threads sticking out that I can't get to later. So I am now doing the word liberty. Okay, so I just stitched the word liberty. So that is the last thing that stitches out on this first block that we did. The next thing that it specifically instructs us to do is to remove it from our hoop and trim it down. Now, I like to conserve stabilizer, so I'm not going to remove this item from the hoop. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to loosen my hoop. I have magnets on my hoop. Sometimes I have a really hard time getting them off, as you can tell. I want to loosen this. And what I like to do is I feed my stabilizer from the top, usually. You might be doing it from the side. But I move my project all the way back down out of the hoop. All right. Now, if I would cut this project out of my stabilizer, I would, not be able to hoop like I am, because I would have cut this stabilizer, right above this design, and that would be too short to fit in my hoop. So that's why I kind of scoot my project down to the end of the hoop. And again, I am just trying to line my stabilizer up in my hoop, and I put it down. Now, none of this fabric is showing in here, so I'm not going to be stitching on that fabric at all. All I'm doing is, saving, maybe like an inch or so of stabilizer all the way across. But it's just something that been accustomed to doing, because I really, stabilizer is, to me, something I buy a lot of, so I like to conserve it when I can. So I'm just going to rehoop this, and we're going to get ready for the next project. But I will talk about this. You can see I have some jump stitches that need to come away, get trimmed. And then later you're going to trim this 6.5 by 6.5. And I'll tell you, if you did the quilting, that 6.5 line is right around where it did this tack down line of the fabric. It's close to that line all the way around. And this does become a 6.5 by 6.5 inch square for that first project that we did. So next we're going to be moving on to page 14, and we're going to start on the flag and star block. So I'm going to go over, we're going to change cameras, and we're going to set up, and we're going to do our cutting of our fabric, and we'll talk about all of that. Thanks.